Let's start with a question. Can a single arcade game reshape an entire genre? In 1995, Sega Rally Championship didn't just push polygons, it pushed feel. It grabbed the entire racing genre by the suspension arms and said, let me show you how it's done. Because this wasn't just another arcade racer with pretty visuals, Sega Rally fundamentally redefined how driving in games feels. It didn't just look smooth, it moved smooth. The physics were revolutionary, the handling was responsive, and the terrain felt alive. So why does this game from the Saturn era, yes, the Saturn, still feel so amazing in 2025? Strap in, we're about to take a wild ride through slippery gravel, perfectly timed drifts, and some of the finest racing game physics ever put on a disc. Buckle up, because this is how Sega Rally made us feel like racing gods. Let's talk about the feel. If you've ever played Sega Rally Championship, then you already know what I mean. That first chicane on the desert course, you brake just a little, the car dips, you feel the rear end kick out slightly, and there it is, that controlled chaos. Every corner in Sega Rally was an invitation to dance with physics. The game didn't just toss you into a turn, it tempted you. Light tap of the brake, quick flick of the wheel. Feel that inertia, the back end starts to slide. You counter, the car bites in and you've entered the perfect power slide like a pro. The slide wasn't canned or scripted, it was entirely based on simplified but intentionally designed physics calculations. Tire friction, weight transfer, grip. The math under the hood was elegant in its simplicity, but devastatingly effective in gameplay. But not in the goofy, moon gravity kind of way you got in Ridge Racer. Here, the drift was purposeful. It wasn't about showing off, it was about maintaining momentum, fighting the terrain and reading the road. And that wasn't just by accident. Sega Rally Championship was the first racer to simulate different surface physics, tarmac, gravel, mud, each with its own grip level, each one demanding something different from you. You see, we're talking about 1994 arcade hardware, then ported onto the Saturn. The idea that track surfaces could alter your handling in real time was borderline insane at that time. The visual cues were subtle, dust kicking up, tire tracks forming, but crucial. The sound design helped too, the whir of tires on asphalt, the crunch of gravel. It wasn't just eye candy, it was driving feedback. This made every race dynamic. You couldn't just memorize a racing line, you had to react. One wrong move on wet mud, and your rally dreams were over. Sega's brilliant developers and their AM3 team knew it couldn't be a hardcore sim, not in the arcade. But what they delivered was far more valuable: intuitive realism. That sweet spot where every gamer, from hardcore gearhead to casual joystick warrior, could jump in and feel like they knew what they were doing. Sega Rally wasn't just a game, it was a masterclass in tactile design. Yeah, that might sound obvious now, but in 1995, this was mind-blowing. Other games were just layering on new cars or neon lights. Sega said, nah, let's simulate dirt. What made it so good was the balance. Sega's team, led by Kenji Sasaki, didn't aim for hardcore simulation. They wanted something called stylized handling. Simple enough to pick up and play, but nuanced enough to reward skill. They had zero real-world rally experience, so they leaned on feedback from Toyota and Fiat. And when they couldn't record the Delta Integrale's engine, one of the developers actually recorded the sounds from his own car. Now that's passion, or budget cuts, or both. Still, the result was a physics system that felt alive. Steering wasn't just left and right, it was negotiation. Acceleration was traction management. And when you finally nailed a perfect lap, it felt like magic. But let's zoom out. Sega Rally wasn't just a fluke of fun, it was a calculated gamble. Interestingly, Kenji Sasaki had previously worked on Ridge Racer over at Namco. So when he moved to Sega, he wanted to do something different. And what could be more different than a genre that most Japanese devs considered niche, if not completely taboo? Rally racing. Instead of perfectly paved circuits, you had gravel, mud, and water. Instead of AI that politely follows the racing line, you had to battle the road itself. Sega Rally took that concept and ran with it. And here's the wild part. The game only had 3 cars. The Toyota Celica GT4, the Lancia Delta HF Integrale, and a hidden Lancia Stratos HF that you could unlock if you were really good. But that's it. They were chosen because they looked cool, sounded great, and were actually rally legends. And the stages? Just as carefully crafted. Desert, forest, mountain, and on the Saturn, an unlockable lakeside track. Each track had different terrain, and the game made sure you felt every bump, rut, and slope. And here's a fun fact, the forest stage was originally modeled on Redwood National Park in California. But when Midway's Cruisin' USA dropped with a similar look, the dev team scrapped it and rethemed the stage to resemble Yosemite. That's how dedicated they were to originality. And if you're wondering why the mountain track feels so immersive, that's because Sasaki himself drove up into the mountains during a development crisis and came back inspired. Clearly, a little existential dread fuels greatness. Now, let's talk Saturn. If you were around in 1995, you'll remember Sega's reputation for its earlier arcade ports to its 32-bit system. And I'm looking at you, Daytona USA. But when Sega Rally hit the Saturn, something clicked. Against all odds, the Saturn version captured the arcade's soul. Sure, the Saturn version ran at just 30 FPS, half of the arcade version. It had less visual polish, and didn't come with the fancy arcade steering wheel, but the handling, that glorious, responsive handling, was intact. No, this wasn't a straight port. The Saturn version was practically rebuilt from scratch. Since development began before Sega's internal graphics libraries for the console were complete, they had to reverse engineer the entire feel of the arcade game by taking screenshots and playing obsessively, and taking copious notes. And yet, it worked. It gets better. The Saturn version had a time attack mode, split-screen multiplayer, a world championship mode where each stage's position carried over to the next, and even tuning options for suspension, brakes, and tires. Yes, you could tune your rally car in a 32-bit console, and this was a full 2 years before Gran Turismo hit the PlayStation. So now, let's talk legacy. Sega Rally didn't just spawn a franchise, it inspired an entire subgenre. Codemasters said flat out that Sega Rally Championship was a blueprint for Colin McRae Rally. Even games like Dirt and WRC owe a piece of their DNA to Sega Rally's philosophy. Accessible driving that rewards mastery. And how about the arcade version? It sold 12,000 units. In Japan, it was the second highest grossing arcade game of 1995. It won awards, topped charts, and cemented Sega AM3 as legends. It even made it into the Guinness Book of World Records in 2009, and Sega Rally Championship was named the best racing game of all time by Retro Gamer magazine, which ranked it as top of its 25 best racing games ever list. Not bad for a game with 3 tracks and 3 cars, huh? So why does Sega Rally still matter? Because it's one of the rare racing games where everything comes together. The physics, the sound, the visual clarity, the music, and the vibe. It doesn't matter that it came out before analog sticks were a thing. It doesn't matter that it only has a handful of cars and tracks. What matters is that when you slide into that first turn, catch the perfect drift, it still feels so right. Sega Rally Championship wasn't trying to be realistic, it was trying to feel real. And in doing so, it made racing feel alive in a way that's still unmatched. No, it doesn't have 200 cars or photorealistic graphics, but what it does have is heart, style, and craft. A feel that many modern games still struggle to capture. The voice clips, long, easy right, maybe, or can't be sure, but they added personality and immersion. You weren't just playing a game, you were on a rally stage with a co-driver barking directions like your life depended on it. And visually, despite the hardware, the game had incredible clarity, clean colors, crisp track design, terrain that communicated gameplay. Nothing was cluttered, everything served a purpose. Design restraint at its finest, functional and beautiful. You can pick it up for 5 minutes and have fun, or spend hours mastering the drifts. Whether you're racing alone, challenging your best time, or going head-to-head in split screen, it still delivers. So if you've never played Sega Rally, or if it's been a while, do yourself a favor. Fire up the Saturn and slide through that corner like you were born to do it. And remember how good games used to feel before realism got in the way of fun. This title is proof positive that while some games age, others like Sega Rally just get better with time. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.